All right, we're live. Um, all right, so yeah, we're gonna do a tier list.
Tier
Um, uh,
list.
Tier list. Okay, so this tier list, for anybody that is watching now, which they aren't because I just hit live right now, and but anybody that goes and starts this from the beginning, this is going to be a tier list of rights violations from humans to cows, and yeah, how? What are we starting with?
Yeah, well, I guess two things just before we start on the actual ranking. Do you want to maybe just speak quickly to like why we're doing this?
Yeah. Well, do you want to?
Um, sure. I mean, this is sort of your thing that you've sort of impacted my mindset a lot on is um, just the view of we all kind of come from the same place in that what we're trying to achieve is the end of animal exploitation and animal liberation and all of that. But there are a lot of things in between where we're at now and then, and a lot of those things aren't necessarily like if we could change some of those things with the snap of our fingers, I think that would be a good thing. And so doing a tier list like this looks at the big picture and breaks it down into all the pieces of why it's really bad to do what we do in this case to cows. And so we put together a lot of the things I think that are like the potential rights violations in the cow farming industry. There's probably more, and maybe we've included some here that other people you might not include in your list or whatever. But like, here's a bunch of stuff that is available to discuss, and we're just going to say like, how bad are each of these things? Some of them are worse than others, and I think the value in doing something like this is potentially if we were going to if we were going to advocate for change for improving like the lives of cows. It's like ultimately abolition is the end goal, but there might be steps we can take along the way and prioritize getting like certain things done faster. Just and the order that these fall into might help prioritize that list of what is most important to do faster. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And one example, if anybody wants to, this might help you think about it further. Is imagine in whatever country you live in right now, if there were no laws, so it was illegal to own slaves, it was legal to kill people, it's legal to punch people in the face, and all these things. You might think, I want all these laws to be like kind of what we think of now, but if you were going to try to fight for laws, you wouldn't say, I need all of these laws to exist before any of them. Like they all have to exist at the same time. You would say, we need to fight really hard to have a law against killing people. And then, even though people could legally still punch you in the face, you wouldn't say, no, don't give me the protection to not be killed until you also give me the protection to not be punched in the face. We would fight for each of these things. I think most of us, especially in first world countries, are pampered by a few hundred years of really good laws being put into place. So we don't recognize that we don't have many individual laws to fight for. And so when we see atrocities happen, like what happens to animals, we think, let's just free them all. They deserve not to have anything bad happen to them. But we don't realize that each of the wrong things that happen, we shouldn't just cross our fingers that if we try to make vegans and then 1,000 years from now there will be no animal holocaust. We should now try to get laws in place saying, do not do XYZ factory farm practices, so on and so forth. But yeah, cool. So what's first?
All right. Well, first, let's just go like top left down,
Okay.
I think is probably the easiest. So, first up, we have slaughterhouse worker abuse. And for a few of these things, um, I've got a couple of clips that I'm just going to be sharing throughout. So, just to sort of put a bit of a visual to what we're actually talking about. Is that showing up on the screen, Carson?
Yep.
Okay. So this is like, obviously this isn't cow farming, but just kind of silly stuff.
Hmm.
I thought I had a cow one queued up, but I guess I went to the wrong timestamp. But so yeah, sorry, maybe a bad example in this case. But yeah,
But
slaughterhouse
if
worker
those are
abuse, we see all kinds of
happening,
things like,
oh, sorry, I was just going to say if those are
go
happening
ahead.
to the chickens, we could imagine that they're happening to the cows, and we could place it based on that idea.
Yeah, a lot of this like that I've seen in footage from things like Dominion and other sort of documentaries where there's hidden cameras set up is like they're trying to guide the cows into the place, and the cow kind of lies down or it refuses to go, and then it's like the slaughterhouse worker gets frustrated, kicks them, prods them with the electric zapper thing, gets a bit violent. Sometimes when they're doing the stun gun, it's like they won't take the time to line it up properly so that it is more instantaneous, and they risk missing the brain, and so then the cow just has a nail go through their head but not into their brain, killing them. Just
Hmm.
things that are just like needlessly painful, horrible, done it at pretty much like the worst time in these animals' lives. So
Hmm.
where would you rank this one, Carson? In which tier? We can always adjust these two as we go.
Yeah. So I guess how I would view this as far as viewing how important it is to stop, it would be referring to either the idea that they can legally do these acts, or that if they're caught doing these acts that are illegal, we would want like our government to enforce them. Um, I would say the importance of doing both those two things, having something deterring people from doing it, or at least putting a law in place saying you can't just throw animals across the room. Um, Man, that's tough because it's such a wide range of things. Like there could be a simple abuse, like just a light little kick on the backside of a cow that's barely going to feel it, or like throwing those chickens in there and slamming it. Um, I think I would want to maybe put that towards the brutal, but I don't know if I
Yeah,
would change
I'm
it
I'm
compared to
hovering
other
in this.
things.
I'm hovering in this area too. We can put it here for now, and if we find that there's too many in brutal, we can move it.
Yeah.
So second one, this is kind of a weird one to come up, but so we're onto deforestation, and
Hmm.
one of the entailments of animal ag is growing the food for these animals. And in the case of most animals, they don't just eat grass their whole lives. A very small percentage do. The vast majority are grain fed for a portion or even all of their lives in some cases.
Hmm.
And so, in order to grow the food for these animals, um, we need to cut down. We need to have space to grow the crops. And as we are feeding a growing population, and with certain third world countries eating more meat, the demand for feed for animals is increasing. And so this is just like one example of the kind of thing that happens with deforestation. There's actually, I couldn't find a whole lot of footage on this, but in this case, there's just this, I think that's an orangutan, um, who's
Mm.
clearly had his home chopped down, and he's kind of going in and attacking the machine that's, and I think these people are actually trying to rescue him and take him somewhere safer than this. But
Mm.
regardless, the point is like all like it's got to be millions. I don't know how many zeros are on that number, but many animals are getting their homes destroyed in order to grow food. So where would you
Yeah.
throw deforestation?
Yeah. Well, and then we got to also factor in if we have the crops to feed the cows, then we have the crop deaths, we have the pesticides that get into the water, the pest dying, various different things. So that's an issue. I don't know exactly where I stand on how much land is owed to certain animals. I do think
Hmm.
it's wrong to go in and destroy take over land that kills animals in the process. I think, especially us humans, should be able to try to rehome them. But I imagine, and this is something for a whole different conversation, but I imagine, like, let's say in Africa, lions just start taking over everything, and they end up. Let's say there are no humans in Africa, and where normally there's an equal amount of animals everywhere. If lions just started taking over everything, and then kind of took over the entire continent, would we say that? certain animals should have more opportunity, and therefore these lions can't take over all this land or let this natural thing happen. And then that makes me wonder, like, do us humans have a limit? Do I think that we're any different than other animals? Maybe we should be able to take over what land we want. And I don't know the right answer. I think we need to have natural land for wild animals, but
I'm in this exact same boat actually. I would, despite seeing some of the horrible effects of this, it's like certain things are necessary for our survival. We are like there's a lot of us, and we have big demands on what we eat, and we are growing crops in a very efficient way compared to like hunting. So if we take it as at a baseline that we need to do what we need to do to survive, it's like, yeah, we're in, there's been many times in human history where we've like warred with each other and taken land from each other and those kind of things. We're not talking about the like yeah, so I would personally probably put this towards like the high end of mild, or maybe the low end of medium.
that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking medium with the likelihood of bumping it down if there aren't other things less than that. But
All
it's
right,
it's
cool.
definitely worth thinking about. I think it's all worth thinking about. So yeah,
Totally.
artificial insemination.
Yes. So I don't know. I guess there's a lot of crossover, it seems, between. I'm going to bring up Garland Farms, but I've heard him say in the past that 10% of cows are artificially inseminated, and so it's
Hmm.
not actually that big of an issue. And most cows are just naturally bred through bulls. So I looked this up. And he's sort of right and he's sort of wrong. He's right regarding cows that are bred for beef, but he's not right about if we include cows that are bred for dairy. So it's approximately 80% of dairy cows in North America are estimated to be artificially inseminated. So
Hmm.
um, that brings the average quite a bit higher. So in any case, we're talking about a lot of cows that
Yeah.
that have this happen to them. And
And
let's
we're
just
not
take a
talking about
quick.
the breeding
Yeah,
aspect of it, right? We're just talking about the idea of
yes,
putting something in their body to impregnate them. Gotcha.
exactly.
Um, so I guess part of it would include the knowledge of suffering, kind of like when we compare like a cow suffering to a bug suffering, and we want to know levels of sentience. We'd also want to know like how much suffering's happening. We can look at it and go, okay, it's gross on many levels. It's bad because there's breeding involved. But I would want to know like what it would be compared to. Like how different would it be from like poking something with a tack versus stabbing, you know? And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so we could look at this one of two ways, and this actually would change how I rank it, I think. I was thinking of this as like the whole process. I was factoring in like the forced breeding as well as the artificial portion of it. So not
Mm-hmm.
just like the poking a stick, but also the forced breeding of another cow, bringing that into existence and that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah. Well, I
so
was
if we look
leaning
at it that
towards.
way, I would push this quite a bit higher, like into the cruel or brutal. And if we're just talking about like the poking in the butt kind of thing,
Mhm.
I would probably put it lower.
I was viewing it as low cruel, but if it's the breeding, then it's high cruel or somewhere in brutal. Um, and do we not have a separate one on breeding itself?
We do. So yeah, it's just what the breeding one I was thinking is like the sort of the natural form of breeding. It would be like comparing sort of like conventional ag to regenerative ag as the two. It's like we factor in all of the things that are true of one and all of the things that are true of the other.
Gotcha. Okay, let's just toss it in cruel, and I'll keep in
Okay.
mind that we're looking at that one as the breeding aspect too, because I think that
Okay.
I think I might even think of that as higher. I just I think
Mhm.
I'll keep thinking about it as we go. I guess.
Yeah, I like. I'm tempted even to put it in brutal. Just
Mm-hmm.
we certainly, as humans, we really dislike the idea of being like raped essentially. And I know that's maybe different for a cow, that's like more mundane in terms of they don't, there's no like, oh, I'm violated or something. It's not quite the same like experience for them.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I may be anthropomorphizing the value a little bit higher than I ought to. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the difference might be something like if somebody's like violated on the streets or something, then there's like a sexual component to it. Where if somebody gets arrested and they are like strip searched because they were selling drugs, they probably aren't going to have traumatic feelings the way somebody on the street getting sexually assaulted would. So I would think of this as probably more like the strip search thing, where they're being forced into something they don't want, but it's not. I can't even imagine what a cow would be thinking, but I would think of it. I don't think a cow is feeling like I like to let this other cow do this thing to me, but not this human dude. So I don't know if the cow is viewed as a violation with a sexual
Hmm.
component at all. I think that might be more of how we humans look at things, but I would say it's worse than putting a dog on a leash, which I don't think is good. It's worse than riding a horse, which is not good. 'Cause putting something inside of something is a whole separate level of violation.
Hmm.
But yeah, adding the breeding element to it and the force here, I feel all right about brutal.
Yeah, okay. I prefer it there, so let's go there. And you put it below slaughterhouse worker abuse.
Um, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I
All right.
guess it's similar. It's similar. I guess I imagine if we were going to change laws, it would be easier to change abuse for abuse sake laws more so than changing a law that says you can't force breed these because the breeding will be part of it. If there was going to be a law change there, I would like the idea of them saying you can't force breed like that. You would have to just get a male and a female and hope they do it, but you can't. So if
Right.
we were going for incremental laws, so
Yeah. So, sorry. Next up, I was a little jumped the gun with the video there. Our next up is branding. So, branding is used as a form of identification. So, farmers will brand their cow so that there's like a permanent mark of what their, the logo or the trademark of their farm. Sometimes
mm,
this is used if the cow is being transferred to another farm partway through its life, so that there's always like a record of the initial farm that it came from. And the stat that I saw is that somewhere between 10 and 37% of cows are branded. The 37 was from a source back in 1992. So I'm not sure if and that was of calves, not just of cows. So that's happening like early in life. There might be even more happening later, but I couldn't find a current source updating that
mm,
stat. So it might be lower now as maybe more welfare laws might be trickling in.
mm.
But
Yeah.
let's just take yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I guess let's look at it real quick.
Okay. Right here. So hot iron, sometimes it's done with an electric iron, but obviously it's very not a nice thing for that guy in the cage there.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, very much not good. I thought of why. So I would put it under brutal probably, but right after the artificial insemination. But I realized why I think that the abuse is worse than the other two because all three of these are abuse, but the abuse in general is it would be like a legal side of allowing ongoing abuse, where the artificial insemination would just be each time they inseminate. So that would be less than the general acceptable abuse at all times, but it would still be more than a one time thing, where the branding is a one time
Mm,
thing. So that's why the branding's a
interesting.
little less bad than the artificial.
I didn't think about it that way. So I had this even higher, just given like the likely intensity of the pain that it causes, and for very little value. But your point
Yeah.
about that it's only once per lifetime, whereas like abuse could be. I guess slaughterhouse worker abuse is sort of it's more or less once as well. Maybe 'cause they're only in there for, a few minutes
Like,
before.
would you rather be branded once on the butt cheek, or 5 times in your life, once a year for 5 years, have be probed? Um, like
Oh,
I,
well, yeah, but I don't know if that's a fair comparison, because it's like I'd be putting my human values, because I would
yeah.
take the brand for sure.
Oh, gotcha. So you're saying the putting the arm in. There's a good chance that putting the arm in and putting the semen in, the pain itself might be a good bit less than the branding.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I don't.
And the thing about the artificial insemination, it's like it's a pretty brutal thing, but it's like it's a thing that's sort of almost necessary for the industry to continue, like in order to make sure that um, if they don't do things in the most efficient way, I guess they all come down to efficiency in a sense. But it seems like if the industry didn't have artificial insemination, they'd have to have way more cows in, you know what I mean, in order to, um, because it would take
Mm.
them longer to get pregnant and longer to reproduce. Therefore,
Yeah, if there were regulations that I would find acceptable in a world where we accept raising and killing animals, then the regulations that say how many animals you can have per acre would cover that. And then on top of that, they could have as many as they want. I guess I would care a lot less if they were just letting animals breed naturally and having more animals
mhm,
than. I like the idea of, if something should be illegal, it shouldn't matter if making it illegal might cause some other issues. It's good
mhm.
to make that illegal thing illegal. So, or
Yeah,
sorry to
that's
make
like
yeah.
the whole thing with the drugs, where people are like, oh, if you make it, what was it? What was the argument? It's like if you make it legal, um,
More people will do it or something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
so are we happy with it here then?
yeah, yeah, and I don't know what to do if we ever strongly disagree. It's cool going wherever, but
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I
I
control the mouse,
pers
so I'll just override you.
yeah, sounds good. I think right about there is good, and I'll say on top of that, considering that I am not comfortable yet making it illegal to raise and eat animals. And even more so, we're talking about the idea of what steps are most important. I would say that if we were going to work towards getting away from branding, I would be more in favor of maybe the clip that goes in the ear that has a tag. Now, this is like piercing an ear versus burning somebody's flesh. If studies could show that they are in more pain by having their ear clipped, then I obviously would change my mind. But that's what I would recommend if they were just saying, like, in this industry we have to tag them in some way. I think
Right.
it would be good to outlaw the burning and to just clip the ear. And maybe there's a better way than the ear thing too.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's sort of you disagree with it for a similar reason as the artificial insemination, and in that there's um, a better way of achieving a similar thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Let's
Milking.
talk about milking. So I tried to find like the cleanest farm that I could for this, but like, oh man, and they look so different from farm to farm. But it's
Mm.
generally it's something like this, where they put them into stalls and they hook up these machines to all of the teats, and then they are milked, and then they herd them in, put them in the stalls, do the milking, and then herd them back to wherever they were before. That's the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, milking is one of my least favorite things. The idea of a machine being hooked to something and the people not being able to know if the cows like are suffering from it, or if they have like sores and it's just tugging at them. Now, similar to the two things we were just talking about with the branding and the insemination, um, as much as I don't think people should ever even get near a cow, if they were going to milk, I'd much prefer them milk with their hands. Like I don't know if Garland Farms actually Garland Farms doesn't do milk at all, but if a farm did the tugging with their hands, I would take that over this any day. And maybe that's what should be outlawed is the machines. Um, but yeah, I find this to be one of the more brutal.
Interesting. So this is where we are going to disagree on this one, actually.
Okay.
My view is like I get you. I don't like any of these things.
Hmm.
I find this like the milking itself. The way I'm viewing it is the milking itself isn't the biggest of the rights violations here. It's like all the stuff that goes with it in the dairy industry that I find that are the worst things.
Okay.
Like the
So
milking, and I would say one more thing is like
yeah.
we've bred cows to the point where it's something like I looked this up. Let me find this. A calf drinks 4.5 quarts of milk per day at birth, and then that sort of scales linearly with their size. I think it's about like 10% of their body weight in milk or something per day.
Hmm.
And yet a cow produces 29 quarts of milk. So that's about 6.4 times more milk than a single calf can drink in a day. And if a cow isn't milked, it's painful and can cause like some of those infections and things like that on the cow. So it's, to me, I'm viewing it as like given where we're at, it's like the milking kind of has to happen, or the cow has to, like, if the cow is pregnant, they have to be milked or they're going to be in pain.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I mean, obviously, we could say, "Oh, just let the baby drink it, and then stop breeding the ones that have the most milk." But obviously, that would
Right.
only be in the world where they stop the milk. Um, yeah.
So we can take the average if we disagree, and if you don't agree with what I said and I don't agree, we can take the average. But I would probably put this in the low, medium, or high mild personally.
Oh, gotcha. I guess I just wish we could know how much pain they're in. Like if they have sores on their udders and they're just being like the machine's doing it without any control. I guess I just view it as the branding happens once, the artificial insemination happens like 5 times, and then the milking is every day for
Every day.
5 years. So, but again, I wish they would do some testing. I guess as long as these practices are going to be legal, I wish somebody would do some testing to see what's happening in their brain as far as how much stress they're going through while being milked, and if different days are different than other days, and then what that compares to the artificial insemination. I would put that personally at brutal in between slaughter and artificial. But if you want it way lower, I mean that's cool. We can
Why
do
don't
it.
we
We can put it
average
in
it?
cruel. I
Average it at
think
cruel.
you make a good point because it might be even more cruel to have these cows and have them have all this milk and then to not pump them. So you make a good point. But I'm pretty sure that every animal, every mammal in the wild, they have a baby. The baby drinks the milk, and then it's painful for the weaning period and the milk drying up, but it dries up and goes away. So
Right.
so I guess this is kind of comparable to the chicken thing, where in nature a chicken would lay one egg a month, but we bred them to lay one a day. And so because they're bred to lay one a day, there's this issue. But with the chickens, they can eat their own eggs to get their calcium back. With this milk issue, it's almost like if we rescued one of these cows, would we milk it to make it not in pain and just milk it a
Yes.
little bit?
If
Yeah, yeah.
if it had given birth, yeah, I think we'd have to.
Like we'd let the cow drink as much as the calf drink as much as it could, and then we
Right.
would just milk and throw away whatever, or I guess give to a milk drinker.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I don't care. Personally, I don't think I would have an issue if there was a pregnant cow that was rescued, had its calf, and there was like an animal shelter or something that or an animal rescue, whatever they're called, that fed the baby calf as much as they wanted and then sold the milk back into the industry or whatever. Like, I don't have too much of an issue with that personally.
Yeah, I don't think we should look into this further and see what we can find out. But I don't think it would be like they were bred to have to be milked this much, so we would still milk them that much. You would just start like making their bodies weaned off it slower and slower than the companies are doing. Because they're capable of pumping, say, however much you said is what the industry does. But if
Yeah,
we
could
had
be.
them in a sanctuary, we'd probably want to do a little bit less each day or each week.
If it
And
works like that, I agree. Yeah.
yeah, humans do at least.
Okay.
My, that's that's how my wife worked. But yeah, I think it's something like that. But I don't know if it's different for being bred to. Like I guess chickens laying eggs don't work like that. Like if you don't remove the egg, I think they probably still lay one a day. So I don't know what breeding something selectively like that does.
I don't know.
Um,
Is that true?
with
I
the
don't know.
chicken thing,
Yeah, I don't know that is
yeah,
that
let's
true?
find out. I think so. I think they lay about one a day, and if you leave the egg there, the chickens will eat it, and they'll get that calcium, and that's really good for them. But I don't think they'll stop laying it because there's one there.
Hmm. Google kind of let me down here. Normally, the hen will simply lay more eggs, says some random Quora. So I don't know. It's as much as you trust
Gotcha.
that.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, we should find out. It's good to know that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So our next one is regenerative ag. So
Hmm.
regenerative ag generally is the farming practice where, oh boy, it's a whole thing, but um, generally it's like open fields like this where cows move from section to section eating grass, and by the time they kind of rotate back to, like, I guess rotational grazing is a form of regenerative. By the time they rotate back to the first quadrant or whatever of the farm, the grass has grown enough that they can eat that portion again. And then there's other kind of things that go with regenerative, but the idea is that it's more environmentally friendly. You're not using like chemicals or fertilizer or insecticide or any of that kind of stuff because you're not growing food for them. They're grazing in open fields. So, and there's like, yeah, there's other forms, but for cow farming, that's generally speaking what we're talking about. Is there anything you'd add to that?
No, no. I just like, I guess in deciding, I imagine I'm ranking this as if there were laws in place saying that on a farm like this, you can't abuse them and those other things we talked about. Would you personally be judging this based on if currently regenerative farms brand their cows and that kind of thing? Or is it just the idea of how we feel about cows roaming like this and eating grass?
Um, yeah, I think everything that's sort of currently entailed by regenerative farming, I would say. I actually don't know if they brand their cows or not, so I would just
Okay.
not factor that in personally unless you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I if the practice of eating animals, raising and eating animals is continuing, I would view that as the least of my worries. The only thing better than what we just saw in my mind would be something like hunting, where it's that except no fences. And so I would put that at the mild, even though obviously in my perfect world that wouldn't exist. Which I want to point out, somebody in the comments, Nikki was talking about how horrible the slaughterhouse abuse and the artificial insemination and branding, and he wasn't sure why we didn't put those diabolical. The thing is, we have a huge list of things to go through, and we think all of them should be not happening. Like even the ones we put at mild or diabolical, we think they should not happen. And so we're just kind of ranking these compared to each other. In a sense, they're all kind of diabolical. So.
Totally.
I say
Yeah.
mild for that one. That one's lower than deforestation for me.
Yeah, I'm think I'm with you too. Um, yeah, regenerative ag, like I think it would definitely be of like if we just snapped our fingers and magically converted there, I think that animals would be it would have significantly better lives. So it's obviously something I would prefer to what we're doing now. What I don't like is people that are sort of, I guess, over investing in it as like like an end goal. And I think I don't like it for a few reasons. One, I'm not convinced of its viability at scale, just given the lower yield. There's a whole thing I can go into about the viability at scale, but maybe we'll save that for another conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
generally on like one animal compared to another animal perspective, I think it's like you would much prefer to be a regeneratively raised cow than you would to be a conventionally raised cow.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any interest in responding to Michaela's comment here? At least your
Oh,
opinions on it?
let's see. Sorry, I have tabbed away from it to open up my thing. Let's see. Doesn't deforestation contribute to all of the other issues, and shouldn't it be ranked higher? Like in today's world, it is causing all those issues so far. Think about land use of 70% for pasture. So is the point there, Michaela, that like with deforestation entails like great pain for, are you talking about the animals that whose homes are kind of destroyed through deforestation? Or are you picking up something else from that one, Carson?
I was thinking maybe she meant that, like, so if we didn't do the deforestation, then we would have less animals. So doing that is making more room to raise animals and their crops and all this stuff. So it's
Oh,
just, but I mean, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think that it's
Yeah.
the demand. The demand for food is the thing underlying that, is in the causal chain. It's not like we're getting more animals because we're deforesting. We're getting more animals because the demand for meat is increasing, which is causing deforestation and which is causing more room for pasture and more cows. That would be my view. So I wouldn't put
Hmm.
the deforestation at the top of that causal chain personally.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I don't think so either. But yeah. Okay. Breeding into existence.
Breeding
Okay.
into existence.
So breeding sucks. I don't like breeding, but it's better to breed naturally, this is the one we're talking about compared to the
Mm-hmm.
artificial. So and if by this we just mean we allow the breeding to happen and we don't prevent it, but it's in.
I'm with you. I think it needs to be below artificial 100%.
Yeah.
Um, so the question is like how much below? I think like the one thing that we need to factor in to breeding someone into existence is like everything is bred into existence without its consent. So it's like what sort of life are you knowingly choosing this being to be bred into? In the case
Mm-hmm.
of like a child, where you have the best intentions to raise it and provide for it to the best of your ability, and then give it a free life beyond, like once it develops sufficiently, I think that is a fairly minimal rights violation on that thing. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if you're breeding someone into slavery or some really horrible situation, that could be a much higher rights violation. So I'm like
Yeah.
maybe in the medium-ish on this one.
Yeah. I'm thinking about. I'm imagining this not including the separating the calf, but it is including the breeding to have the next set of the calves grow up to have the same abuse, but
Yes.
be somewhat like a regenerative farm. Um, it's after milking for me, but yeah, somewhere in there, like medium somewhere. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. With my unsure thoughts on the deforestation of like how much land we owe to nature to stay nature, I'm so unsure about that. Where I am sure that I don't think we should breed animals into existence. Yeah, I would say I put it worse than deforestation. So I think that's good right there.
okay. Next is
Michaela wrote a couple more if you wanted to.
oh sure.
Um,
Do you want to read it?
yeah, so she said less animals would die for agriculture reasons, both in respect to those who would lose homes from deforestation and those who would lose lives from cattle farming that the land is cleared for. So yeah, oh, so both. I guess she's referring to kind of like the orangutans that we watched, and then also if there's more cows put on the land. To add, native people get displaced from their homes due to deforestation, so it causes human suffering too, along with environmental damage. That's
Gotcha.
what I was trying to say. Okay, cool, yeah, and that makes sense. I think maybe it's hard to rank because it's such a big topic. Like, is deforestation wrong, or is deforestation where native tribes live wrong? Like, so it's hard to know which element we're calling wrong. Is there a good deforestation? And I think clearly, because I live in a house right now. um but are there a lot of bad ones that might happen currently? Yes, but I don't know how to rank them. I feel comfortable
Yeah,
leaving it where it's at for now. But Michaela, you do make a good point, and thank you.
totally.
Concentrated feedlot.
Yeah, concentrated
Is that
feedlot. So yeah, I've got a just, I don't know, a little drone shot of one of, seems like probably one of the, like what a larger scale feedlot would look like. Stuff like this, where you have pastures upon pastures upon pastures. Um, I'd be interested to learn how this works, but it seems like there's roads between all these things. So presumably, like tractors come in and maybe just dump feed. And I don't know how,
Yeah.
like, I don't see anywhere for water, but I assume that it's here somewhere. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's in the middle and there's like a water system connecting all of it. I don't really know, but nonetheless, you can kind of see like the approximate amount of space that each cow has. It's like you're not crammed in like chickens are in their coops, but you don't exactly. It's like a pretty high percentage of animals to space. Like there's not a whole lot of room.
Yeah. Like if we had to compare animal to animal, I would say factory farming of cows like this is way better for the cow than factory farming of like pigs and chickens that are
Oh
crammed in
yeah,
smaller. But yeah, okay. So I wasn't sure with the feedlot if we were referring to where are they in that spot throughout the day, pretty much, or their whole lives.
so it depends. I think with in a lot of places where it doesn't get super cold at night, it's likely they would be in a place like that their whole life. I know in dairy farms, a lot of time they keep them inside for extended periods, and maybe this is the case for beef farms as well.
Hmm.
Um, in where there's in more like temperate zones, I guess, where there's like colder winters and colder night times. Um, but yes, it would be some mix of like outdoor pastures like that with indoor, like probably more contained areas as well, depending on where you are
Gotcha.
geographically.
And then also we have to factor in. I think we're factoring in the fact that they are being fed a diet that is not optimal for them. Um,
Yeah,
like in nature, they would try to find grass growing and whatnot, or even dead grass that had grown. Where this is whatever is cheapest for us to feed them. Therefore, they have more miserable lives.
yeah. So 95% of the cows in the U.S. are, or at least this was the stat that I saw, are grain fed as or
Mhm.
grain finished, like one of the two. Um, and their digestive system is not super down with eating grains and corn and soy and stuff like that. So it's like it's not as good for them as it would be to eat grass. That's why like a lot of people who eat
Mhm.
meat say that like, oh, grass fed is a much more like nutrient dense and everything. It's like it has to do with um, it's a lot cheaper to feed them these foods because you can grow them in a lot more concentrated area, but it's a lot harder on the cow's digestive system for sure.
Gotcha. Okay, so just as far as how they feel where they're at, I'm going to ask you a question that I think can lead us to places somewhere. Would you rather there be most farms be like what we just saw, but where it was illegal and held up that there was no abuse allowed? Like you can't abuse them. They're just raised like what we just saw, and then you kill them instantly. Or would you rather the majority of farms be regenerative farming and they get to abuse them and do stuff kind of like we just saw with the chickens, but the cow version of that, just like being assholes to them and kicking them and punching them around?
I would probably take the concentrated feedlot with no abuse.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
I don't know what the day-to-day life of a cow is in terms of what's going on in their gut either, and how uncomfortable that is. So I don't really
Yeah.
know, but my gut would be that the non-abuse concentrated lot would be preferred.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I was thinking about putting that somewhere between like slaughter and artificial.
Oh, really?
Well, just because so the artificial insemination itself, it's uncomfortable, it's not good, but it's 5 times in their lives and it's done. Them, if they're truly in those tiny cages we just saw every day for their entire lives, um, if I could end one of those two things, if I could make every farm regenerative as far as how they get to stand and graze, or could I take away artificial insemination and make them just be forced to breed naturally? There would be no question. It would be the quickest in a heartbeat. I would make it to where they could roam around on grass and have more open area.
Interesting.
Yeah, just because the 5 acts that happen 5 times in their lives. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm cool with you. You have
This
the
is
mouse.
like
You can drop
this
it
is
wherever
every
you
day.
want.
Yeah. Well, you might have talked me into moving it up from medium into cruel. So why don't we split it and throw it at the end of brutal?
Perfect. Okay, that sounds good. Same thing with branding though. Something just to ponder. I would, if I had to choose to be branded and put on a regenerative farm, or have my ear clipped, or even no clipping at all, just no branding of any kind, and
Yeah.
put in that feedlot. You could brand me 50
Yeah.
times and let me roam
I
around
would.
in grass. So yeah, being crammed in those small spaces, it's not as bad as pigs. Oh man, it depresses me with the pigs, but
Oof,
yeah,
yeah.
brutal for sure.
Yeah.
All right, which one's next?
So we've got isolating calves. So
Oh,
here we're talking about typically the dairy industry, where cows are taken away from their moms, and so there's a couple of things that can happen with dairy calves. They are either the males are typically sometimes killed as waste. A lot of times they are raised for somewhere between, I think the youngest is like 5 or 6 weeks, right up to like just below 9 months, I think is the maximum to be considered for veal. And it's usually quite a bit lower than that. But anyway, the point is for some period of time in their young life, they're taken to something like this, and generally they're isolated. And the mom, or sorry, the female calves that are born from dairy cows are typically eventually, once they hit puberty or can have a baby, they go live the same life that their mom lived.
yeah.
But this is kind of the life. It's not always indoors. This one is indoors. A lot of times they're outdoors, but generally they're in something like this where they are isolated, completely alone. They have a neighbor probably nearby, but no way to socialize or interact. Cows are very social creatures, and they spend their early days alone
And I
in
think
a very
something to do
small
with
place
how
like
veal
this.
is supposed to be done. They're either like partially starved, or they just don't let them move much because they don't want their muscles to build for meat texture, which I need to look into further. Now, the worst part, um, I guess maybe not on a whole, like those calves' lives every day is probably worse than this. But what seems to be the worst part to me is actually the mother not getting, the emotional connection of like so many mammals like do everything. They sacrifice their own lives to like save their own children.
Hold that thought, because we
Mhm.
got later on we have taking calves away and veal cows. So here we're specifically talking
Oh.
about the isolation of calves.
Oh, okay. I thought this
Yeah.
was including the taking away. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
just the
said all that stuff
isolation.
sort of just to give a bit of context for like
Okay.
what's
No, you're
happening.
good.
But yeah, we're talking about just the isolating
Um,
stuff.
I guess for just the isolated, oh, but that's still so shitty. Yeah, I mean, I guess in a sense, it looks less depressing than the feedlot one we saw, but I guess it's just about as equally bad. I mean, it's like a feedlot except crammed into smaller areas. It just didn't look as desert-like and depressing as the feedlot. But how would you compare it to the feedlot?
Yeah, I I would put it probably similar. I would put it probably maybe even slightly worse since you're isolated and you literally have, in the other one
Yeah.
at least you maybe make some friends, and this one you're kind of alone and afraid, and
Yeah,
no one.
if the food is the same and the weather's the same and all that, I would say the isolation makes it even worse. I wonder what their reasoning is instead of having them in a feedlot with the calves all together. That'd be interesting to look into.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting to look into.
That's a good thing about doing stuff like this is like we all know we hate anything involving any of this tortured animals,
Mhm.
but oftentimes we don't know what's going on, and when we have conversations like this, it leads us to research it and find out. Um, yeah. Okay. What do we got?
Next is just generally indoor confinement for cows. And so again, we talked about some of the reasons why this might happen. It happens, I think, more often with dairy cows, and it's generally the purpose of it is so that they can control things that need controlling, like the temperature, being able to monitor what they're eating and drinking, and it also reduces any sort of predation that would happen in some of the more open fields where they bring them in.
Mm.
So that's the reasons why farmers do it. But yeah, the implication, I don't have a video for this one, but
Hmm.
it's generally like they're in barns. I actually don't know if they're all like individual or if they're group, like pens. I'm actually not sure what the standard practice there is.
Yeah. I like if we remove the idea of like if something's worse, like if the feedlots are worse because um, it happens more often. If we just remove that and it's just a 1-to-1, one cow being here versus there, I would say the indoors is worse because I feel with animals that's kind of the hope is that they can go outside and see some sun.
Mhm.
Um,
So you're thinking like in this area?
I would call it worse. I'd call all three of that, the isolated calves and the feedlots, all worse than artificial insemination and the branding. But yeah, somewhere in there's probably good. Let's see. How different is it from the calves? I would call the calves worse, just barely, because the calves are indoors ish, and I don't know if they're permanently in
They're
there,
not
but
always indoors. The calves are sometimes indoors, sometimes outdoors. So I don't know how we
uh,
value that one.
gotcha.
I've seen them outdoors a lot too.
Well, I'd say indoor isolated's the worst, and then indoor not isolated, and then outdoor isolated, and then outdoor
Yeah.
feedlot. So all of those right there are pretty brutal.
Okay. Are we okay with this order?
Yeah, I mean again, I would put the artificial insemination and the branding at the end of that list just because
Mhm.
those only happen five. I say five. I don't really know if it's five, but cows probably get pregnant about 5 times,
Yeah,
and then
it's
the
yeah.
branding happens about once. So really, like to them in their lives, if you know that thing you always say, if you put your brain in there and ask them questions, I think they would rather be branded once than to spend their entire lives isolated or their entire lives indoors. So yeah, but I mean, yeah, somewhere in there is good.
It's interesting. I was not thinking about it that way. I was thinking about it more in terms of like the moment of like the act itself, and
Yeah.
not like the act like repeated over time. But
Mm.
I do like looking at it that way, and I'm sort of questioning if we do look at it that way, does that change even how high this is ranked, for example?
I mean, only in the sense that I personally viewed the milking worse because milking is every single day and the
Mhm.
branding's once. But I mean, I also see what you're saying about the milking, where those ones that are bred to be, it's kind of like the sheep that are bred to like
For the
grow
wool.
crazy
Yeah.
wool. If you don't shear them, they will get overpowered by it and die. But
Mhm.
we should not allow that kind of breeding. So it's just tricky because once they're already alive, do we put it out of its misery or do we shear it to treat it well? So that's why I think you're right with the milking. So I think those are good at being brutal, but I think they're just behind all those other things. So
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
this one was originally probably a candidate for me for the diabolical category, but it does
mm,
only happen once during their life, but it is pretty brutal. This is disbudding or dehorning, and
oof.
this is um, the act of essentially removing the horns from the cows, and they do this a number of
Oof.
ways. I think the more common way is what we saw there with the burning them off, but they can
Uh-huh.
also be sawed or clipped off as well.
What are there? Is it to make them less dangerous?
Um,
I guess the
I
reason
actually,
doesn't matter. That's some shitty shit
yeah,
right there.
well, let's Google that. I actually don't remember. Why do we, yeah, I was looking this up for the earlier one too. Why do we disbud cows? Removing horns by disbudding or dehorning is a common management practice in order to reduce the risk of injury and bruising to other cattle. That makes sense when they're
Mm.
playing or doing whatever they do.
My guess is they don't do that for regenerative farming.
Hmm.
And but yeah, that was pretty brutal. I think at least from the reaction to the ones we just saw, which could be like cherry picked, that looked worse than the artificial insemination. Definitely worse than the branding,
Hmm.
I'd say. Um,
Can we throw
uh,
this in diabolical? Because it's like, so I'm just thinking
mhm.
like, yeah, if you're bred into a, like if you have a life where you do this these things, like you're isolated or confined every day, it's like, yeah, we'd probably choose a short amount of torture. But man, like if you looked at like an extreme act of torture versus like, oh, I don't know, keeping somebody in a pen their whole life, maybe that's pretty extreme too. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
this is no more diabolical than the others. Where would you
Yeah,
put this?
I was going to say that slaughterhouse worker abuse one could be that and more. So I wouldn't put it above that. But maybe we
Well, this
need
is
to
standard
move.
practice. That's the thing.
Yeah, let's put that up at diabolical, but let's put the slaughterhouse one in front of it.
I like
Um,
it.
yeah. But also, yeah, it's just like it's horrible. It's disgusting. But if it happens that one time and then they're on a regenerative farm versus if it didn't happen at all and they're on the feedlot, again, like it'd be a tougher decision. Um, because the branding is way less of a deal to me than that debudding and then
Ugh.
the
Yeah.
and then even same with the pregnancy one, although I wish I knew how they felt when getting impregnated. um so I guess maybe the what is it, the confined indoors, the isolated, and the feedlot, all three of those should maybe be before the disbudding and on
All up
the
in all up in diabolical.
yeah, and then leave the other two on brutal. Maybe I don't know. I just try to imagine if I were changing laws, I would much rather cows be grazing on grass with their horns gone than them in tiny little cages in factory farm feedlots.
Yeah.
It's tricky though.
Yeah.
Elliot's
Yeah.
here.
When you
Hello,
when you
Elliot.
factor in the fact that that they have to endure that their whole lives, I think for sure.
Yeah.
Although I
Okay.
wonder, like, if you kind of just like as a cow that's born into that life, you don't exactly know what you're missing out on. So it's not like you necessarily have like, you know what I mean? Like that's just your
Hmm.
whole world is your living situation. And then when you get this extreme pain, it's horrible because you know what it's like to not be in extreme pain.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm good with, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you kind of just have to imagine yourself getting the options. Like if somebody said like this cow's going to spend 5 years in this area, cramped and having a shitty life, you could save that one and put it on this farm, or this other cow's going to get its horns removed and spend 5 years roaming, eating grass, having the greatest life out in the sun.
Hmm.
You can only save one. Which one do you save? Which one do you bring to your sanctuary?
Yeah,
And yeah, it's tough, but I think I would bring the one that was going to be miserable every day for its entire life to the sanctuary.
totally.
Okay, farmer abuse, is that much different than the slaughterhouse abuse?
Yeah, I don't know if it is or not. I wanted to put them separately just in case. maybe the farmer abuse, it's like somebody that is with them every day, and so it's like it's maybe more of a betrayal almost.
Mm.
I don't know if it's any different really, to me.
Yeah, in my mind right now, I think I just kind of view them both the same.
Okay.
As being like the top thing I would have change. I probably would have it change before the feedlots change. So
Yeah, I mean, farmer abuse, if we're going with the amount that is potentially happening over an animal's life as well, like they're only in the
Mhm.
slaughterhouse a very short period of time at the end of their life, whereas the farmer abuse could be happening every day potentially.
Yeah, yep,
So yeah, I'm good with it at the top of the list for now.
cool, cool. I can't read that next one.
The next one says genetic modification. So yeah, we
Mm.
all have seen the pictures of what a cow looked like thousands of years ago. They were a lot slimmer, a lot less fatty, much smaller udders. Um,
Mm.
the source that I found on this was that 10,000 years ago was sort of the first, or the what is it, the ancestor, I guess, most common ancestor of all cows was 10,000 years ago,
Mm.
was some sort of a domesticated ox.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, since then we've done all the things we talked about, where
Yeah,
they too much milk, too big of udders, where they can barely walk.
yeah. So this one's tricky because the rest of these, I'm imagining how I would have regulations be impacting them. Where this one, it's something that's already done and passed. Like,
Mhm.
so I don't know if there would be a reversal of it or if there's current modifications that are happening that we would want to put a stop to. But ignoring that idea of
Well,
just
let's say current modifications.
like, do you think that is a thing? Like,
So
do you think they're still breeding new cows to be the cows more likely to give more milk?
don't know.
Okay. Um, I guess I would have to
They
consider.
definitely do in certain contexts. Like for I know for like show cows, I think they have like genetic modification, like selective breeding for that kind of thing. But
Mm,
I actually I don't know for dairy or for like for beef cows.
gotcha. I mean, my instant thought is brutal right before the artificial insemination,
Oh,
especially since it happens with it. Um,
interesting.
I guess it doesn't have to, but I would imagine you would do the artificial insemination to make this selective breeding
So
happen.
here's my view on this one. I'm thinking a lot lower. I'm going to try to talk you into
Okay.
it. So
Yeah, yeah, go for
the
it.
genetic modification for like for a cow that exists today, the genetic
Mm-hmm.
modification is nothing, right? It's like you're breeding one versus another. It has very little impact on the life of the cow whose genes are being selected for. The rights
Mm-hmm.
violation here is to the future cow who is born with certain qualities that make their life less desirable. That's
Yeah.
my view on this. So does that anywhere close to compare to these things? I don't
Well,
know.
that's why it's trickier because yeah, like for one, if we didn't do that, then we wouldn't have the milking situation where we
Mhm.
have to milk them because they're bred to be milked like that. So in a sense, it feels like it should be worse than that, but it's not anything that I could imagine. I would put laws on everything else here before that one because I don't know how you would have a law saying you can't breed these two things that look like they'll give a better outcome. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I have a tough time with that one. So right about there seems good, especially if we're talking about modern stuff. If it's going back and changing what happened back in the day, that would be really high on the list.
Yeah.
Because yeah,
Okay.
like the sheep one's a perfect example. Like I don't think we should shear sheep, but there are certain sheep that I would shear myself to save its life. you know,
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's a bummer. But yeah, that's good right there. I think.
Okay. Parental advisory warning for halal slaughter because this is pretty brutal. So halal slaughter is there are certain religions that I guess necessitate. I know Islam is an example that necessitate that there's no stunning being done on the animal before killing it, and that it's killed by bleeding out by slashing the throat of the animal. So I have one more I'm going to show here too. So halal slaughter is basically and the people who do this intending to be as ethical as possible. The intent is that the animal doesn't know what's happening. They kind of come up behind them, slit the throat, and they say it's more or less instant. It's certainly not ever that. As you can see, it's like fear, like pain. His legs are probably broken because he's so heavy. And clearly that's far from instant, right? Like he's breathing through the sliced throat, and it's a good 7, 8, 10 seconds before they lose consciousness. When the alternative is like the bolt gun stun is kind of the conventional mechanism for that. So to me, this is like one of the worst.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how long they survive after that slash versus the bolt gun. But I'm guessing the bolt gun's more instant for sure.
Bolt gun is instant. I looked this up earlier for this, but let me see. When stunning goes perfectly, it's fairly instant. The cow goes into I can't remember the term, but it's basically rigid, and it's like it's not conscious. It's not dead, but it's like not conscious, and so you can kill it. There's no more pain or anything. But they say depending on the slaughterhouse workers' experience and skill, somewhere between 5 and 19% of the time, the stunning is not done accurately, meaning the bolt gun isn't positioned properly, like right angle with the head or in the right place or whatever. Or maybe the cow's moving its head, and so they don't get the shot off properly. So when that happens, let's average that out to about like 12.5% of the time, where the shot isn't taken accurately. 35% of that time, the cow isn't stunned. So I think that works out to about 4 out of 100 cows that have the bolt gun just get a nail in the head.
Well, they're standing there, where the two that you just showed, one's being hung from its leg. Its leg has to be breaking up there, and the other one's forced down to the ground, which is not a normal position for it. So no, this is bad. Let's see. Isolated disbudding. Worse than disbudding. I don't know about all the other things that are counting their entire lives. Now, if you combine things, it's tricky because you could have regenerative farming, which is their best life they could have, but then if it ends with halal, that might be worse than the feedlot with a bolt to the head.
Yeah.
But if we're just looking at them separately, I would say that's right above disbudding.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it there as long as it's in diabolical.
As long as it's in diabolical.
Yeah. Carson, are we powering through this, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, no, let's keep going. We're good.
Okay.
Let me check. I'm good. I have no angry texts, so I'm good.
Okay,
what's next?
So these next two are kind of interesting. Legislations in ag. I was trying to get to some of the externalities of ag, and so legislations on ag, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but like this would be something like a law is passed that you can't farm cows anymore or something like that, where now all these farmers are having this issue where their business and their livelihood and what they've done their whole lives isn't a thing anymore. So where would you rate that, and what other considerations would you have there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have thoughts on how you kind of phase that kind of thing out. I mean, it's probably best when something is normal and accepted. You give a certain end point, like this practice has to be done 5 years from now. And, there should be government funded things where they can show people how to switch over to different types of farming, like go from animal farming to something else. I don't know the right answer to this, but I don't know.
It's got to be at the bottom, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Somewhere in the bottom.
Got to
Yeah.
be.
I see
Like,
it as an issue, but yeah.
oh, totally. I think so too. But like this is like many of the other things that we've phased out as we've advanced for any reason. Like ethical
Yeah.
is certainly a good reason, but there's other reasons too. And there's like
Hmm.
no obligation to protect certain industries or jobs as our
Yeah.
society advances, whether that be our like moral inclinations advancing or
Yeah.
technological or anything. So
It's like ending slavery. It's like it could have negatively affected them financially in a crazy way, but it doesn't mean you keep slavery going. If anything, you
totally.
treat it kind of like a buyback program. I'd say maybe if there was a cutoff date and then the government said, like, okay, we're going to give you this many dollars for however many cows you have, and then we're going to move these cows to a sanctuary. But as far as like their futures, I don't know what the answer is. It's a bummer that somebody could like lose their entire profession because that profession became illegal, but it doesn't mean the profession should keep going. So yeah, I think that's a good spot.
All right.
Restricted
Restricted
diets.
diets. So this would be like a government regulation that forbade us from eating certain things. Like meat would be an example.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that should happen. What do you think? And I guess we shouldn't. This could be a longer conversation. Would you, if you could talk the government into it, would you have raising animals, killing them, and eating them become illegal?
Yes.
Okay. Would you have it be illegal to kill animals altogether, like fishing and hunting would also be illegal?
Um, yes, I think
Okay.
so. Like unless what I would want as part of that process is the smartest of the environmentalists and the everyone from the other side to give me all of the data and reasons as to why that, like what possible negative externalities that could have, so that maybe that it would be phased into a situation towards that. But yeah, generally speaking, it's like I it seems a far less a priority, um, of like worrying about the externalities, unless completely dire to the planet survivability or something, than
Hmm.
worrying about just like the horrible rights violation of just like being able to kill things and eat them. Like
Yeah.
we don't allow humans to kill humans. That's illegal. Nobody complains about that law. So
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it would just be tricky. Like in the rare cases that I say that I would sort of be up for it, is if as long as we are right and it turns out that people don't have horrible health benefits, or sorry, horrible health outcomes. Like I don't agree with people like Garland that has this whole list of all the vitamins and stuff you can't get from a vegan diet. But there seems to be enough people that are somewhat of experts that have their thoughts on why you need certain things, or at least why a lot of people think of like the Mediterranean diet as being superior to a whole food vegan diet. And I don't know how much the law should take into account something like optimal health versus the in between survival and optimal health. But it becomes complicated because some vegans I know would say that it should also be illegal to eat bivalves, and then some of us might say because they're not sentient. So it's just big for all of human history. People have been eating animals, and I want them to stop. I'm hoping that we can get by without doing it, especially with bivalves. It seems like the few things that people are really concerned about, like vitamin D, B12, and omegas, are weirdly the things that all bivalves are like full of. And so I want to convince more vegans to eat this. Although I don't know how sustainable that is. Like if everybody stopped eating all animal products, but then everybody also needed bivalves, like how many of those do we have? We might have to start
mhm.
farming them. But anyways, I sorry, I'm getting off track. Can you
Yeah,
explain to me again,
yeah,
like,
yeah. So just to quickly respond to what you said there, and then I'll explain again. I'll let you ask that question. But um, I understand there would be some negative stuff that comes out of it. I'm just saying that the good of outlawing it would far outweigh those negative things. We'd figure it out and it would be fine, is my view, and it would be less bad than the situation where it's not illegal. So it's like
Hmm.
by waiting or figuring things out or like delaying making it illegal, maybe it would, like, we'd be able to head off some of those bad outcomes. But
Hmm.
I say, like, let's just deal with those bad outcomes and figure it out, because
Yeah.
it's better than the alternative of continuing doing what we're doing. So yeah,
Gotcha.
that's my point there. And
Okay.
what did you want me to re-explain, or did that do it?
I I just can't remember exactly how I'm supposed to be viewing that. Like, do I? Yeah, say it again.
Yeah. So government just like making a law you can't eat meat would be an example of this.
Gotcha. I am not in favor of that happening right now. So, I don't think that that happening would be as bad as any of those top ones.
I
Um,
mean, you're not in favor of any of these things happening, right?
yeah. Oh, correct. Correct. There's,
So where does it rank for you? I'd put it here personally. So if you disagree, we can split the difference,
um,
or you can try to talk me into it if you want.
um, no, splitting the difference is good. It can go somewhere right there is good.
Somewhere here.
Yeah.
Where would you put it?
Well, I guess it's complicated because I'm viewing it as almost backwards. If somebody told me that today they were either going to outlaw eating meat or they were going to outlaw,
Mm,
let's say, letting cows breed naturally in. Oh, that's funny. Those are kind of the same. Uh, um, well, let's just say compare it to a harder one. So let's say branding. They're going to outlaw branding or outlaw eating animals. I'm nervous about the idea of them outlawing eating animals, but I don't want the branding to happen. And if I had to pick, and they kind of counter like, so which one's worse? The actual outlawing it. I'm trying to ignore the idea that it would be chaos and not care about the fact of the chaos, more so of if I think it's a good idea or not. Um, I would I would put it up. I'd put it at the top of medium.
okay, it's top of medium.
I'm just not ready for it to happen. Where I'm.
I'll allow it to go here if you want. Does that
Okay,
work?
that sounds good. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the next one?
Okay, next one is sort of the a theme that we're onto
Oh,
lately.
rodenticide. Yeah.
Yeah, so replace this with whatever kind of
Does this
bad
work for a cow
stuff
thing?
that would for their food, and potentially for barns
Oh.
as well. So a lot of farmers use rodenticide outside of barns because mice and rodents like to go in there because it's warmer in colder climates and there's sometimes food and stuff in there. And then
Hmm.
they would certainly be used in the growing of the crops that are used to feed most cows. So
Hmm.
I think most people that are on this channel probably know a lot about rodenticides. Is it worth explaining anything, or should we?
No, I think it's fine. We probably don't need to. But in your mind, are you viewing it as how big of a deal something is by how common it is, or individual acts like a cow being on a feedlot? How does that cow feel? A rodent eating the rodenticide and slowly dying. How does that rat feel? Or are you like recognizing that more cows have this treatment than rodents do in their crops?
Yeah, we should have probably done this at the beginning as a as picked. Maybe we can learn this lesson for the next time we do a tier list. But
Yeah.
picked like what objective standard are we using? And like the one I've heard you say a few times is if I had to pick between like outlawing, this or outlawing
Mm-hmm.
that. So maybe let's use that standard.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And this is tricky because I would want to outlaw the feedlot method, which would mean that there'd be no crop deaths because there'd be no crops. Like they would just be
Right.
regenerative, um, and so that would take care of that. But
Well, oh yeah,
yeah,
I guess it would take care of the in the context of cow food at least.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so I guess I would it like if we if cows can be in feedlots, if that's legal, and then therefore they are having food grown for them, then I would want there to be rodenticide to make sure that we're not just starving cows to death. So I would have to view the feedlot as much worse.
Sorry,
Um,
I don't quite understand that.
like so, if we're imagining things just how they are, there are feedlots, and if those feedlots can stay, and therefore we have to feed the cows, so we have to grow the food. Similar to I'm going to keep eating, and so I'm okay with rodenticide, in a
Why do
sense
we
that
need rodenticide for there to be feedlots, though?
if that's needed to get the food for the cows, like if
It, do you think that is true?
ooh, I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I don't think it's certainly not necessarily true. Like maybe
mm,
it's more efficient if you use rodenticide, but like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's certainly not necessary. Like there's alternatives, and you could just not use it and deal with some losses to your like yield loss.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as far as this, the mice suffering element of it, and it's they eat it. I don't know. Let's just assume they eat it and they die within a couple hours. Um, the suffering is probably somewhat like the branding or the artificial insemination. Um, so if yeah, yeah. So even though I would be accepting of rodenticiding some rodents to be able to continue living myself. As far as if I was going to change things, that would be near the top of my list. So yeah, it would be somewhere right in there. Would I rather a rodent suffer to death from poison or a cow be branded? I don't know. It's probably right about the same.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I'm pretty good with it there too.
yeah.
There's also like the second generation effects of rodenticide, which kind of raise this up in my mind as well
Oh,
to this
yeah, like
level. I don't know if it raised above, but like, yeah, so a
birds eating it and
scavenger.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm okay with moving it around on that list. It could be in front of
I'm good there.
artificial. Yeah, cool. Me
Yeah,
too.
I'm good here.
Okay, slaughter
Yeah,
something.
slaughter with stun. So we talked about
Okay.
this a little bit of just the, when it's done properly, it is pretty much instantaneous. It's done generally with a bolt gun that goes through the top of the flat part of their forehead or head or whatever it is, straight into their brain, and then they are killed, like their throat is slit shortly after to kill them.
Yeah.
But I think we said the calculation was about 4 out of 100. Um, go ahead and fact check me on that if you want. I think that was what my sources said.
Hmm.
I'd be curious to know the number if that's verified or not. But I think
Yeah.
if it's about 4 out of 100 cows have a much like not a great time with this, where the instant effect does not happen and they need to be bolted again, or sometimes they're bolted and they're like twitching around, and so they kind of rush to the next step. So it's pretty horrible when it goes wrong. But obviously, it's I think certainly better than halal on the net.
Yeah. Oh, way better. I
So the
was gonna.
ceiling is here, but I would go ahead.
Yeah. It seems like it's got to be better than the rodenticide. I would even maybe put it as better than milk. So let's say you had two dairy cows, and one was going to be killed that day. They're the same age. They've been milked the same amount of time. One's going to be killed that day, and the other one was going to be killed that day. But they could say, which one of you would want to be milked another week before we put the bolt gun to your head? I think they would both be racing to say, bolt me today.
Mm.
So I would say the milking, in a sense, is worse, although it's complicated by the good point you made about the milking. Um, that they want that milking to
Yeah,
happen.
the life of the dairy cow is bad, but the milking itself maybe isn't the bad part of the worst part of that
Yeah.
life.
So yeah, somewhere right in there is probably perfect.
Okay. Okay, we got another brutal one, or not necessarily brutal, but I
Cow
just mean like,
dogging. I didn't know they do
yeah,
that for cows.
yeah. Oops. Ah, now these are certainly not baby calves. So I don't know at what point it's done in their life, and I don't know I didn't look up what percentage of cows have this done to them.
That looked worse than the disbudding to me. Again, it's something I probably need to look into for what likely is causing stress for how many hours after it happens. Uh, um,
There's
so in between halal and disbudding, I think.
55% of cows on medium-sized farms, 20 compared to 27% on small farms, 34% on large farms had dock tails in 2010.
What's the
So
reasoning?
yeah, what that's I googled that earlier too because it seemed just
Yeah.
crazy to me. But they said improved comfort for the milking personnel. I guess when you're trying to attach the things onto the udders, the tail if the tail's swatting around in the way,
Oh, so
it could.
that's just dairy cows.
Um, hmm,
Yeah. But yeah, either.
probably, yeah. Yeah, and they said enhanced udder cleanliness as well, reduced incidence of mastitis, and improved milk quality and milk hygiene. So yeah, it seems like it's a dairy cow thing.
Yeah, that's some dumb shit. I would say I'd put that above the disbudding.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, taking calves away. Ugh. Would you rather
Yeah.
have your tail cut off or have your baby removed from you? Um, I
Oh
don't want to
man.
compare it to humans necessarily, but I mean, I've seen so many animals where the moms just like will sacrifice their lives to save their babies. Like it's just so programmed in mammals for moms to take care of their babies. And I've seen so many cows chase after their calves and crying out. So if some scientist can show me why I'm wrong, then good. But I would put it maybe above halal, isolated calves. Again, it's hard to compare a one-off. This isn't really a one-off incident though, so I think the like something like the tail docking and the disbudding and the branding is all like it happens then, and within a day you're going to be over it.
Mhm,
I think the moms go through a crazy amount of stress, probably for weeks or something.
mhm.
Um, so I don't know if it should be before or after isolated, but if I could end halal as a practice or end removing calves as a practice, those are a toss up for me. But I think if they truly it was illegal to remove calves, I'd probably have that be the one.
Over halal, you mean?
Yeah, I think so, but I
Yeah,
mean
we're
it's
pretty
right around
close.
there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I'm probably below. I probably put it below halal, but
Okay.
right in that same range too. Um, yeah, I read that the reason they take them away often pretty much right at birth a lot of times is because after the first 24 hours there's like I guess the bond between the mother and the calf intensifies, and it's actually a lot worse emotionally to have it removed like a week later or something. So that's why
Yeah.
it seems probably worse to us to remove it like right away. And it's still, I'm not saying it's like not emotional for the mom. I know it's still a horrible thing. Um,
It probably
but I
feels
think that's.
more like it would if the mom gave birth to a dead calf.
Mhm.
It's probably something like that to lose it so quick they don't get attached. Yeah,
Yeah.
but but yeah, and I think that due to how important the colostrum, the first bit of milk is, I think they actually milk the cow and give that to the calf. But then after that, they give the calf like some kind of fake formula crap. But yeah, it's disgusting. That's
Yeah.
that's near the top of what I wish would go. Um, yeah, yeah.
All right.
Okay, veal
Veal
cows.
cows. So yeah, so veal is basically anything before puberty, which happens around 9 months. Um, I think the average is between 5 and 6 months old is when cows are killed, but sometimes it's even in the first 3 weeks of their life as well.
Hmm.
But yes, somewhere in there, it's basically the practice of killing baby cows for meat.
Gotcha. Okay, and then did you read something about, do they feed them less or do they let
I
them
haven't heard that.
exercise less? I think they confine them to a very, let's see, veal I
I
think
have a
it makes
oh,
their meat a certain texture because of it. Um, Baby cows in veal crates are confined from running, jumping, or even walking to produce the most tender veal.
gross.
Yeah, I don't know how long they're confined for. This sounds sad, but I guess I would, in a shitty factory farm life, the sooner you die, the better, probably. So the fact that it's a baby, that hits our emotions in a certain way, but I don't feel worse for a baby than I do for like an older cow
Yeah.
dying. But the confining part, like treating it badly for to get a better taste, is horrible.
Yeah, if that's true, that actually bumps this even higher than what I had for it. You said you saw that? That's
Yeah, I just read that. Yeah, I had heard that. It's because mussels make meat tougher, and with veal, they want it to be this like melt in your mouth type thing. Um, yeah, if you just Google veal calves confined, there's thehumanleague.org has a huge thing on it, and then Humane Society facts on veal calves. Um, but yeah,
yeah.
and I think that's for a decent amount of their lives. I think it's their whole lives because the whole point is they don't want them to get muscles at all, so they're
Yikes.
just making them as weak as possible. And so I guess unless we find out different details, I would put that above the isolated calves. Um,
It's got to be.
it's got to be, and maybe even if it happens less, if we're looking at individual cases, it's worse for a veal calf than a concentrated feedlot calf.
I think so. I think so. It's like a shorter life, which is maybe better.
Yeah.
But I mean, is this almost
My right
at the
there.
top?
Yeah.
I don't like here.
I would put it there because whatever treatment happens to it, something like that could happen for the abuse options.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's near the top. That's some bogus stuff. I imagine like 20 years from now, even if we don't see a lot of change, I think we'll see stuff like people talk about veal calves as a thing of the past. Like, I can't believe this ever happened. Um,
Hopefully, a lot of this stuff is talked about that way.
yeah,
I have a crazy wild card thing that just popped up as I was finding these video clips that
yeah.
I don't have a card for it for the tier, but I'm curious where you would put this because this is just like one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen.
Hmm.
But it's essentially they install
Oh,
a
I've
portal into the cow's stomach so that they can check on it, like check on the digestion and what's happening in there.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
to me,
crazy.
it's like, uh, yeah. So they're pulling out like
What?
some of the stuff to check on how quickly it's digesting, I guess. And yeah, I'm just like, it's the way we're treating animals as these like machines to make us food, and just we can do what we want to them regardless of their life or their feelings or their family or whatever. It's just crazy, the commoditization of living sentient things.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's really shitty. And what's almost more shitty, I feel bad saying this, but what's almost more shitty is the amount, and I say this while admitting I could be wrong about this, but the amount of vegans that would rather focus on making vegans than focus on ending this top tier list, this the diabolical. If the amount of people that would say that they don't want to act as if it's okay to just have stronger regulations, I think if they were thinking it through and if they were watching these videos more, or if they visited a slaughterhouse or something, they would recognize that if in their lifetime there will not be an ending of farming altogether, like people will not be, it will not be illegal to go hunting, go fishing, all these different things, or probably even to end regenerative farms. And if they knew they could focus more energy into getting all the even meat eaters to try to end something like veal farming, or end something like the tail docking, like that's just like so much suffering that you are making not happen to these animals anymore. And I'm hoping to see a big change in the world, and especially even if there are some vegans that don't want to do that, I want to see those vegans not mock the vegans that do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you ever watch Roger Yates, and I don't want to judge any, I shouldn't have said his name. I don't want to judge anybody too harshly, but he'll just talk about, oh, and these animal rights people, they call themselves vegans, but they're just fighting for better treatment and welfare and whatever. And it's like, yes, we want there to not, these rights violations to not be infringed upon. And yeah, and it's anyways, I'm gonna stop. That's my last time saying a name of a person. But yeah, I I wish we could, in a sense, like, I don't know, like, is it even fair of me if I'm saying that they should not judge people that want to do this? Should I be even saying that I find it outrageous that they aren't willing to fight for this?
Well, I don't know. My view is that any effort towards fighting for any of this is good. So whether it's fighting for the end goal only, or fighting for any of these welfare improvements, or any combination of that, like, I would consider myself like on the same team as any of those people.
Gotcha. Oh no, I do too. I'm on the same team. Just part of me just feels like it's the odds of changing some of these things in our lifetime is so much higher than changing the other things. But maybe that's
Yeah,
maybe that's a human error, that I care about what happens in my lifetime.
yeah, probably is. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I really don't know the efficacy of certain activation styles, or sorry, activism styles, and
Mm-hmm.
whether or not, like, it's better to build a grassroots movement and get more vegans and then make a big push once critical mass has hit. Is that the fastest way to get like the best outcome, or is it just like incremental changes for the better, that like focusing on the worst issues that are the most painful, the worst rights violations that are. I
You cut out.
literally have no idea, and I would love if there was like someone who was, well, maybe there are people like this that know
Mm-hmm.
what the best way to
Yeah.
make changes. But
I wonder if there's a way to figure it out kind of mathematically. I mean, it seems like it'd be almost impossible, like how much time each person spends on their type of being an activist. And yeah, it's kind of weird. I also wonder, yeah, there's so much to break down, because there's the ideas that if we removed everything from diabolical and then everything else still happened, I mean, we would have to look at that as a huge win, right? That'd be a huge win. But then
have to.
there's the argument that if you remove all of those, then the people that
Don't
might have
say
gone vegan would just feel fine with it, and they'd keep going with
it.
it.
uh, that's such
But
a silly argument. Like that,
oh,
because obviously, like, the
yeah,
reverse of that is like, let's just add a row above diabolical then, that, and add
removing
all of those things, and
removing
so that,
cow legs and putting them
yeah,
on the shelf.
that goes on the row
You saw
above.
that lady respond to that, saying that she wouldn't fight for their legs, right?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I asked somebody that was an abolitionist. I said, okay, so let's say a
Maybe I did see
farmer
that.
figures out how to cut their legs off and put them on a shelf, and they pump food into them, and they can fit them in better, and it's just extreme factory farming. And I said, would you fight to make that illegal? And she said no.
Would you want to make it illegal? If she could snap her fingers, I wonder.
I think she said yes, but
Okay.
she wouldn't put any effort into it, and
Okay.
she wouldn't think anybody should fight for it, and that would be approving of it, approving of having them at all if you fight for them to just have better conditions,
Mm.
and yeah, that just blows my mind. I
Yeah.
don't get that. But I kind of view it as there's nothing more important than laws. So anything that should be illegal or whatever should be illegal, and therefore the more you do, you make that whole top row illegal. The rest of the things, if we still have a good argument for it, then we have an argument for it. It's not that we need
Yeah.
something to look worse.
Yeah.
It's we can look at those and go, this is bad. Each of these
I
things
think
is bad.
I think it works the opposite way. It's like as you start to become more compassionate for something, you start you start bringing it into your circle of moral concern, and then it's easier to have
Mhm.
more to do more things that are in that direction. I think
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it's like the old sales thing. It's like you get somebody saying yes to little things, and then it's like
Mhm.
they're more likely to say yes later on in a conversation to the big questions
Yeah.
later.
If you get people that like posting about their favorite political topics on Facebook, if you get some of them, even if they're meat eaters, to say they want to fight to end like tail docking or something, then they're a person that is actively doing something for animal rights, so they're more likely to do more things for animal rights, and eventually they'll be like, oh my gosh, how did I do this thing? But if you don't get them to do that one thing, then they're just going to be never never fighting for anything. So
Hmm.
yeah, cool. All right, man. Well, this was great. I think we should definitely do this with each animal, and I'm not sure what we should do. Maybe with pets, we should do all pets on the same tier list. Because I'm curious to do stuff with
Hmm.
dogs that's not normally talked about, like seeing eye dogs and stuff like that. But I don't know how many things are legal to do to dogs that we would have a list just for dogs. But it'd be interesting to compare what we think about owning a snake versus owning a fish, and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, yeah, for
yeah,
sure. I guess if anyone has ideas for different tier lists that you'd like to see, you can let us know in the comments too.
yeah, definitely. Oh,
Or if
Alice,
we screwed up and you want to correct the order and you think that something should have been higher or lower,
yeah, there's
make your
probably
case.
a lot of things that we could learn about each of these topics. Allison just hopped in and said bonjour.
Good morning.
And we are just ending this, but Allison, you should go back and watch it and leave a comment on the live stream, the non-live version, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But yeah, okay. Well, Michael, it's great talking, and let's do it again soon.
Sounds good, man. Have a good
All
night.
right, take care.
See ya.